Hi, today we are going to be discussing polymerase chain reaction, also known as PCR. PCR is a laboratory technique that allows one to make copies of biological material through amplification. The origin of PCR involved many individuals, however, Kary Mullis is the individual who is often credited for the discovery of PCR. Kary Mullis was on a camping trip with his girlfriend when he envisioned the concept of PCR. He stated that with 2 oligonucleotides, DNA polymerase, and the 4 nucleoside triphosphates, I could make as much of a DNA sequence as I want. The technique of PCR was first published in the journal Science in late 1985. And Mullis received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1993 for the discovery of PCR. The procedure of PCR involves 6 essential components: a DNA template, DNA primers, Taq DNA polymerase, dNTPA, a reaction buffer, and a thermocycler. PCR is performed in 3 steps: denaturation, annealing, and extension. In the denaturation step, the sample is heated to 95 degrees Celsius, which breaks the hydrogen bonds holding the DNA template together and produces 2 separate strands. In the second annealing step, a temperature of 55 to 72 degrees Celsius allows the 2 DNA primers to anneal to their complementary template DNA strand. In the last step, known as extension, using a temperature of 72 degrees Celsius, Taq DNA polymerase synthesizes new DNA strands by beginning from the 3' end of the DNA primers. Commonly there are around 35 to 40 cycles repeated, and each cycle the amount of initial DNA present is doubled. PCR is used in a variety of applications such as forensics, paleontology, and COVID-19 testing. In forensics, DNA samples that are isolated from a crime scene can be compared with DNA from suspects using PCR. In terms of paleontology, PCR allows DNA that is thousands or millions of years old to be sequenced from dried or fossilized specimens. One of the most common COVID-19 testing methods involves PCR. COVID-19 PCR tests use primers specific to the virus, which means that PCR will only be able to amplify DNA from the sample if the individual has COVID-19. Overall, PCR is a core laboratory technique and was a crucial discovery.